Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Preacher. A great season premiere, just a great episode all around. That beginning part was just so good, even before like the title pops up. I'd probably say like, especially on the level of goriness, it probably like goes on par with like the whole Cassidy scene at the beginning of season 1. I would say probably like even more so just because like explosions, body parts flying out, people being blown to bits and stuff like that, just kind of a firefight and shit like that. I mean, that opening in this episode had everything. Had a car chase, conversation about foreskin, which I just love that whole like conversation. It's like, oh, they got to be doing something because that's like 70 million people like or got circumcised. So it's like, what are they doing with all that foreskin? Maybe they're putting it in face cream. And so it's like, no, they're not. It's like if they were, you'd feel the foreskin in your face or whatever. It's like, well, why you think your skin's so smooth and everything? And then, you have Jesse being like, well, your skin is smooth. And she's like, shut up. So there's that whole conversation. But then like the car chase, and I appreciate them putting that filter on it. And everyone in the car is singing and everything, just kind of getting so caught up in it. Because I love the fact of the matter is immediately setting the tone of being like, hey, we're going to cause some trouble. Like, there were already some troublemakers well before all of this. All three of them are in their own retrospects was already a troublemaker. It's like, now you got all three of them together, and it's like, it's definitely going to be a wild ride. Already setting that tone right from the very beginning and everything. So, I also appreciate that the fact is, it literally picks up right where season 1 left off. They like, season 1's finale just happened. It's like, yep, we're on day 1 of the road trip to find God. But obviously, like, I wasn't actually expecting them to run into the cowboy, or as we learned in this episode, he's called the Saint of Killers. Did not expect them to run into him immediately. I guess that also shows you his fortitude, because the fact is he's walking there, but he is relentless. He doesn't stop. And I guess whatever the hell he is, he doesn't need to sleep or stop, because he's always walking, always chasing after Jesse. Understandably so. I mean, he already has this problem with preachers, but considering the fact is that it's like, hey, this is his way of getting out of hell, not having to relive the hell that he's been through, then it's even more incentive to kill Jesse. I mean, maybe there's something else too. I mean, because like, we don't really know that much about his backstory. I mean, we learned a bit in season 1, but even that's just only a fraction. We don't know how he got to where he was, how he ended up in hell in the first place, like why he is called the Saint of Killers. Is that just like, because we also, like, because obviously in our flashback, we learned that he was, like, the butcher of Gettysburg, killed, like, 77 men. Like, that's what we learned about him in season 1. So maybe it's a situation, like, the fact is they use Saint in front of him, it's like, maybe that's just the ironic name to call him. Or maybe it's a situation like, oh, he actually was kind of a holy warrior or something like that. A holy gunslinger at one point in time, but then got banished to hell or something for whatever circumstances. Maybe it's something like that, or maybe he was always in hell. It makes you wonder, like, was his hell specialized because of being how important he is, or is it just like hell works like that for everyone? Subsequently rewatching season 1, I forgot who said it, but there was a line that was in the dialogue that made, now that I was like, knowing that ahead of time, I was like, huh, it seemed like they were foreshadowing that ahead of time, but nevertheless, crazy powerful ass guns, because that's something I brought up too, like last season, is like, he has to be something else, because like the fact that matters, his guns, the way they work, it's like he was able to kill DeBlanc, and I don't think I really registered it at the time when I was originally talking about season 1, but the fact is he killed the Seraphim at the end, and we didn't see her kind of pop up again, so it's not a situation of like, oh, he was able to kill DeBlanc, and DeBlanc didn't come back because it was a whole them being in hell situation. It's like, no, his guns are, like I said, are enchanted or something, so it makes me think like, either he's powered by hell juice or something like that, or he was something else before he went to hell. It's the reason why his guns work the way they are. Is it the guns, or is it specifically the fact is that they're in his hands? Like, does he supercharge his guns? Because like, they're pistols, yet they can blow half a dude's head off with one shot. Also blow a hole in a car like it's nothing. I feel so bad for all those cops at the beginning like that. There's even a moment later on when he goes and meets that Minister Mike and get, it's like, oh, where's the preacher? The fact of the matter is, like, he's like, you know who I am. So it's like, so it seems like Mike definitely knew a lot more than he let on. I mean, he studied a lot of stuff when it comes to religion and stuff like that. That's why Jesse and then went to him in the first place, obviously. But it seemed like he's like, oh, I know exactly who you are. He's like, oh, I have ways of making you talk. I assume that meant torture, but maybe he has other means of making you talk. Like I said, it just seemed like it would be a situation where they'd meet him at least partway into the season. Wasn't expecting that, like, right within what that had to be at least within like the first 10 minutes of the show. Bam, crawls past with him, and it was just out of nowhere. There's just a and one of the cops got hit, and it kind of exploded. It's like, whoa, wait, what? And he's like I said, just relentlessly going after them. So, I mean, later on too, to prove it even more so. I mean, because that kind of puts things in perspective too, because Genesis doesn't work on him. The fact of the matter is, it works on everyone else. It sure as hell works on angels. I assume that was an angel pretending to be God at the end of season 1. So, plus we already know it works on DeBlanc and Fior. So, and speaking of like DeBlanc and Fior, at least Fior, there was a point in the episode where it's like a television is playing. It's like, oh, like basically it's like someone's got a show going on, and at one point you see the person kind of turn their head, but you don't get a look at their face because Jesse's not really paying attention to the television, but Cassidy is, and he kind of goes, huh? In that moment, I'm like, that's Fior, isn't it? Because we don't know, like the last time we saw him, he took the bus ride back from hell, obviously alone, so... And I'm sure probably he's not going back to heaven, because probably in his mind he's like, I can't go back to heaven. What's the point of going back to heaven now that DeBlanc's gone? It's like, it'd be meaningless, especially because I'm just going to get in trouble. He's like, I guess, and also it's like, there's no point of going back until this whole Genesis situation is settled. So, but the fact of the matter is, because I was curious, I think I might have brought that up when I was talking about season 1 too, is like, what are the limitations to Genesis? Like, how does it, like, are there things that it can't work on? And it seems at the very least, like, it doesn't work on the Cowboys. So that's kind of interesting. For whatever reason. Maybe it's whatever he is blocks it. Maybe they're like natural enemies. Maybe the fact is he has something inside of him too, much like Jesse has Genesis inside of him. Maybe not. We'll just kind of have to like wait and see in that department. Another big thing this episode is poor Cassidy, just because of the fact of the matter. I mean, for one, the whole situation with the cops at the beginning, like he's like, oh no, I need this because I'll get burned, and one of the cops is actually helping him out and everything. He's like, what the hell you? And the other cop's like, oh, what the hell you doing? He's like, what do you mean? He said he'll get burned and everything. It's like, you idiot, and knocks the umbrella away. He's like, see, I guess he weren't lying about the whole burning thing. Then there's the whole tulip thing, and I was curious. That was another thing I was curious about. I was like, was that going to continue? And it's like, yeah. Even when they were in the gas station, like back there getting drinks and stuff, he's like, oh yeah. Hot sauce and Yahoo, that'll kind of get the blood taste out of your mouth and everything, because she had siphoned gas through intestines. That is pretty, I mean, I guess in terms of that's pretty metal. At the very least hardcore. Like, I sound like such a tryhard, me saying it like, oh, that's so metal. Nevertheless, but yeah, the moment you saw him looking at her, to kind of look on his face, and then they're in a car waiting for Jesse, and then he's just looking at her, and she looks in the mirror, she's like, what? He's like, nothing. Like, I mean, maybe we should, tell Jesse about it. So it's like, wait, what? Cassidy, that might just be the dumbest thing you've ever said. He's like, no, I don't, I doubt that. I've said some pretty dumb things before. But it's like, dude, that sucks because you see that it's there. I felt like that was going to be a thing, and it totally is. And it's like, because he has a thing for Tulip, and he's looking at her just like, oh man, she's like the most beautiful creature I've ever met. Because to her, it was just kind of like things weren't hitting off with Jesse. She wasn't getting him back like she wanted it to. So it's just like, hey, you have a thing for me, so let's do this. But for him, it's like, it meant a lot, because, I mean, we still don't know much about Cassidy's past either. I mean, he's talked about it, but never really dived too deeply into it. I mean, and his storyline never really came up too much during the first season. Like, only in the first episode did we deal with the whole, like, being hunted thing. So, at the very least, they haven't tracked him down again. The religious people coming after him because being an abomination and everything. And also that thing at the end with him and Doug. Like, the fact is he's touching on a stripper and everything, and he's explaining himself later on. It's like, there's the 3-second rules that you can touch, a stripper and do whatever, like, before it's a problem. And then Tulip's like, Cassie, you idiot, that's food. And he's just like, because, because I love how it was shot too, because it's like you see Jesse and Tulip having this conversation with Tammy, and then on the back screen you can see the whole thing with him and Dougie and a stripper kind of going out, and then like a gun gets involved and a shot goes through the wall and kills Tammy. It's like, ugh. And the moment they all come into the room, you have Cassie be like, "Oh, phoo, you're in trouble, mister," talking to Dougie like that. Like it wasn't his fault, which he's apologizing it to Jesse, because it's like I said, like, I guess because out of anything, Cassie kind of feels like a fuck up. I mean, he screwed up the whole situation, but at the same time, also he has to deal with the whole, like, because he doesn't want to lie to Jesse, but at the same time, Tulip's like, yeah, don't tell Jesse, because you don't. I mean, we saw the way Jesse kind of reacted, like finding out who or what you were. Is like, would he take kindly to the fact is that you slept with Tulip, especially because there were situations where, like, especially last season, Tulip talked about like a story of like what happened during, what was it? Was it the Komodo dragon? Was it the Komodo dragon? I should know that since I just rewatched season 1 recently. So like I should know that, but it's not. I think it was the Komodo dragons. Like he shot it in the head just because the guy kept checking Tulip out. So it shows you just kind of what person Jesse was, but obviously he's a different person. But the whole conversation came up of like, there's different sides to everybody. But like Tulip was like, yeah, but there's a very different side to Jesse, a kind of a darker side. So, but we did learn that in fact God is somewhere on Earth, because Tammy before dying was like, yeah, he came here. He wasn't here because he was like had a favorite stripper or something like that. It's like, no, he came here because he liked the jazz music. He was like kind of a regular at that strip club and everything. Because even Jesse was like, wait, what? God came to a strip club? For what? What was he like? And she was like, the fact of the matter is, you want to ask God questions, he's not going to answer a damn thing. What he's going to do is he's going to stare at you and he's going to look through you like glass, and you're most likely going to shit yourself, which is just kind of very, that's very eerie, I guess. The word I was thinking was, it's not important. Nevertheless, but kind of going back to Minister Mike for a little bit, it's a situation of like, he ended up bringing up a conversation of like, well, if God's here, like the question is, why is he here? Is he in trouble? Does he need help or what? I mean, immediately my brain kind of goes, might be one of those existential crisis type of situations of just being like, I created this and everything, but things aren't necessarily going the way I want it to. So it's like, I want to sit here and kind of maybe, I mean, for all we know, it might be a situation where he's like, maybe it's, I want to kind of get a good look, kind of understand my creations a little bit better so I can decide whether or not I'm going to continue with this project or scrap it and start over. I mean, where my mind goes, but I mean, maybe that's not the case at all, but still. But you also like, for Jesse too, it's like, he's going to find out, one way or another, like what this whole God situation is, like whether, if God gives him a good enough answer, as he said last season, he's like, I'll kick his ass. Obviously this season, he like, at least this episode when talking to Mike, he was like pulling it back a little bit. He's like, I'll hold him accountable for everything. And Mike's like, what? Hold God? Are you stupid? Your dad would kick your ass for talking like that. But I guess Jesse also brought up something that was kind of interesting too, that his dad was like, okay, you've got much things bigger than this waiting for you. And it's like, huh. And Jesse's like, it's almost like my dad knew. And it's like, did his dad know? Because another thing that came up this episode also, it's like his family situation. Like, because the fact of the matter is, outside of him and his dad and his mom, like, they didn't really have much family. At least his dad's side of the family, like, the only person his dad had was Mike, who was like a family friend. But his mom's side of the family, I forgot what they're called, but Langless or something like that. It's like, it kind of got an eerie vibe to it. And he's like, yeah, they weren't invited to the wedding or something like that. So I was like, what does that mean? Because I was under the impression his mom had just left is kind of the vibe I was getting. But, maybe, I don't remember them really outright saying like she died, but that's what Jesse was kind of alluding to. It's like, yeah, she is gone. So it's like, huh. But the thing is, like, what about her side of the family, Because the question still is, why Jesse? Every other person Genesis entered died. Blew up, but Jesse's the only one that Genesis has stayed in for a long period of time. Genesis left and still went back inside his body. Now, maybe that's just because Jesse proved to be a suitable host and decided to go back to him. Or maybe it's just the fact is that Genesis is like, no, we've already bonded enough that even if someone tried to pull me out, I will always go back to you nonetheless. So, I mean, maybe it's both. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's neither. But nevertheless, it's like we still want the answer of like why Jesse. And that's another thing I'm completely forgetting to talk about too, is like, I love that this episode too also played a role of like, yeah, Tulip setting up stipulations about him using Genesis. He's like when he's using it on the cops and everything, even asking telling one of the cops to mace his own balls. I'm like, oh man, that sucks, dude. And then you have like another, he's like, I want you two to hold hands, and he's having another one sing a song. She's like, I'm not really into it. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I don't know, you think this is right? He's like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, I mean, this whole Genesis thing, I don't really like it. It's all getting into people's head. That's kind of wrong and everything. And she's like, it's just not even fun. He's like, it's fun for me, which is like, mind controlling abilities. It's kind of like, you kind of see the appeal there. But at the same time, I think for Tulip, it's like, I mean, she's already kind of like, towards Genesis and everything, but it's also like, it's not fun. We're not doing hands-on, like, we're the wild, crazy duo. I mean, at this point, trio, because of Cassidy. So it's like, we should raise a little hell, kind of get hands-on, but we're not doing that. We're just kind of, I don't know. It's not fun. It's almost cheating, which is like, yeah, it is. But even later on, when they're talking to Tammy and everything, like, Tulip's like, okay, oh no, only use Genesis when it's a last resort. I mean, if you want to, you should beat the crap out of her if you want to get answers. She's like, I can't beat the crap out of her. She's an old woman. It's like, she's not that old, and if you want to, I can beat her up. It's like, wow. Come on, let me use Genesis. It's like, it's not fair to like mess around with someone's head. That's not cool. He's like, okay, I'll use Genesis and then I'll wipe her memory so she doesn't know that I messed with her head. Duh. I love the conversation going back and forth and the stipulations like that. So, I mean, because it's so interesting, because I obviously, like, Jesse had his reservations about using it, obviously, back in season 1 at the tail end of it, but obviously, like, that's kind of disappeared, and he's using it a lot more and everything because it helps him. And obviously sometimes it just slips out just because he kind of gets, like, there's those people that are standing from him, he's like, move, and afterwards he's kind of like, sorry, it just kind of upset the whole situation. Cassidy I mean, I don't know if you can really call that directly killing Tammy before they can really get any answers and stuff like that. Because the only clue they have to go on is like, God likes jazz. Not a lot to go on there. So, but we do know kind of telltale signs of people who've met God, because like they kind of get the shakes and stuff like that. Because Mike described like Tammy as like, she went super pale. So I assume it's a situation of like, I mean, it also makes you wonder, like, it's what it's like to meet him. Like, I mean, obviously she was like, oh, I can't wait for you to meet him because you're gonna shit yourself. But it's like, does he have like a glow about him or something? Like, what is it exactly? Like, is it like fake God was doing back in season 1, kind of a glow like that? He's probably just gonna look like some average dude, I would assume. I mean, with this series, you should never assume anything. Why? Because this series is fucking weird and there's no telling what they'll do with it, so. I mean, but overall, just a fantastic premiere. I'm so happy to have Preacher back. Like, legitimately, this has been the thing I've been looking forward to the most this month. I've loved everything else that's popped up, but it's like, dude, this is what I've been looking forward to. I've been so excited, especially when I start seeing those previews of everything. It's just, I know this season is just going to be spectacular. Also, side note, too, is they still don't know about Anvil. I was, like, surprised about that, because every time it was about to come up, like, something would come about. So, because for Jesse, it's like, oh, this is the mission, this is what I'm supposed to do and everything. Because another thing that came up, like a conversation between DeBlanc and him was like, oh, you've had Genesis for this long, and how much good have you done? And it's like, oh, he wants to, well, and now it's all about searching for God, but I think on some level he still thinks, okay, it balances out because I am doing some good, because this is also about getting Eugene out of hell. This is all about understanding why I was chosen, like what God's whole deal is, like why he here on earth, does he need help, and stuff like that. But it's like, once you find out about Anvil, what does that mean? Because that's their home, for both Jesse and Tulip. I mean, Tulip had her Uncle Walter still there, and there were people there that she actually cared about. I mean, she kind of buddied up with Emily and stuff like that. There were people there and everything, especially if you're trying to get Eugene back. How do you explain to Eugene that his dad's gone? Because that's inadvertently Jesse's fault, because of the whole, like, oh yeah, God, finding out that God is missing because of that whole thing. Like, that town is gone now because the guy that was keeping the reactor and everything in check, had his situation and ended up dying. So it's kind of like, and that's kind of, I know, like, I feel like they've already set that tone this season by being Cassidy and like, saying it again, being like, yo, Jesse's a good bloke. He just, he's always trying to do the good, trying to do the right thing. That's very different from most people. That's more so like than most people can say and everything. So, but then again, it's like, even when you try to do good, things kind of turn to shit. And then literally an entire town of people are gone because of your actions and everything. Like, none of this would have happened if you never had Genesis, if you hadn't gone out, like, trying to prove a point, trying to be good, because the question is also, and it's something that popped up last season, and it's definitely going to probably pop up this season. Like, at what point is it just Jesse? At what point is it Genesis? Because it's like, you're, like I said, because you do have those moments where like Jesse uses the power, and it's like, or you seem like you have control at some moments, but in other moments it seems like you just get overtaken by the power and you just want to use it. So I'm sure questions like that are going to pop up. I'm very curious to see how this all plays, especially with the end, with the like Jesse trying to use Genesis, but it's not working, and the Saint of Killers like heading towards him like that and everything. So do note that there will be a new episode tomorrow night as well, episode 2. I mean, granted, by the time you see that, that will be tonight that's coming out. So that's pretty cool. I guess with the scheduling and everything, they probably wanted to do maybe like a 2-hour premiere type of thing, but with their things as they are, wouldn't be able to do it. Either way, I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to, like I said, like see what goes on in the next episode, but also like the rest of this season, because like I said, from the very beginning, they've already set the tone of like this season is just going to be so much fun, because obviously season 1 was a lot of setup, and season 2 is just going to be, in my opinion, a lot of payoff and continuation of that. So that's kind of my whole thought on it and everything. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.